So let's begin by meeting each of our panelists. First, I will introduce each of them and then we'll start the questions. So I'd like to introduce first Alfonso Thomas. He is the Director of Engineering and Technical Management at the Air Force Sustainment Center at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. He's responsible for leadership and technical direction to a workforce of more than 4,500 science and engineering professionals supporting the center's mission, which encompasses depot maintenance, repair, and overhaul activities, supply chain management, and software maintenance. Mr. Thomas began his professional career as an officer in the U.S. Air Force, managing space and missile warning acquisition programs. Welcome, Alfonso Thomas. Thank you so much for bringing the perspective of somebody that's managed software development for things that are real world and very timely.
Thanks, Suzanne. Glad I could be here.
Thank you. Our next panelist I will introduce is Jeffrey Larson. Dr. Jeffrey Larson is a computational mathematician in the Mathematics and Computer Science Division at Argonne National Laboratory. He researches algorithms for mathematical optimizations that are motivated by real-world applications from areas including particle accelerator design and quantum computing. Jeffrey is also co-chair of the Argonne ACT-SO, a cultural, technological, and scientific Olympics and STEM enrichment program that partners Argonne National Lab scientists with Chicago area African-American high school students. He's also taught courses at the graduate and undergraduate level, including courses at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden and the International College of Beijing. Thank you, Jeffrey, so much for bringing the National Lab and your mentoring experience to this panel.
Thanks.
The next panelist I'll introduce is Dr. Tensima Islam. Tanzima is an assistant professor at the Department of Computational Sciences at Texas State University. Her research develops software tools and data-driven analysis techniques to automatically identify performance problems of scientific applications running on high-performance computing systems and then mitigate them. The impact of her research on improving application performance has been recognized nationally and internationally. She is also a Department of Energy Sustainable Research Pathways Fellow. This is a sister program that helps mentor faculty and staff, sister program of HPC-W and the ECP Broader Engagement Initiative. Also, she is the co-founder of the first research mentoring platform in Bangladesh. Hold on, I have a question that has come in.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Tanzima. Okay, let's see. Our next, last but not least panelist is Tony Baylis. Tony is the Director of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He collaborates with LLNL's senior leadership on the organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and he leads the execution of building a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive lab culture and workforce. Tony's career spans over 30 years of administrative, project, program, technical, organizational management, and senior leadership in industry, academia, government, film, and broadcast media, and in scientific and technical environments. In all of those interesting and varied careers, he has mentored over 200 students and professionals throughout his career. Thank you so much, Tony, for bringing that broad perspective and the perspective of diversity, equity, inclusion to the panel.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be participating with such a distinguished set of panelists. So it's going to be fun. Let's try to make it fun.
We will make it fun. Okay, if people are just joining us, it looks like there was a Teams link somehow sent out. So there will be people joining us here in the next few minutes. But let's get started with the first question. So on the Google Sheet that everyone voted, the number one question that came up is as follows. So each of you have been mentees yourselves. Could you each share the aha moment that you learned from a mentor or another colleague that had the biggest impact on your career? So aha moment and mentor, this could be a positive mentor or maybe one of those negative mentors that tells you what not to do. So it doesn't have to be an official mentor, but could each of you share the aha moment that you learned from a mentor or colleague that has had the biggest impact on your career? And I'm going to ask Alfonso Thomas to please lead us off on this question.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. So I'm sure there are many aha moments if I had a lot of time to think about it. But one that sticks out in my mind is after leaving the military, coming into the civilian realm, the preparation and mentoring is very different. And the military is very formal. It's part of everyone's day-to-day discussion about their career and about their technical advancement. So it's a normal part of the day-to-day discussion, but as a civilian in civil service, it's not necessarily that way, especially when you're in a production environment, when the day-to-day focus is on production. So in that situation, there was not very much mentoring going on, but eventually I got to this point where I realized that I wanted to advance. I started looking for ways to do that. And at one point, the thing next for me was to apply for a promotion from GS-13 to GS-14. And I looked at all the possible GS-14 jobs that were announced, and I thought to myself, I'm not sure I qualify for any of those jobs. I'm not sure I could even compete for any of those jobs. And so for a while, I deliberately did not apply for those jobs because I didn't have the confidence in myself that I could compete well for those jobs, let alone win the job. Well, in stepped one of my first mentors, who basically gave me the kind of kick in the rear that I needed to say that I've got to take a different look at myself and look at what I bring to the table, what I have to offer to the Air Force specifically. And he believed that I had what it took not only to compete for one of those jobs, but to win one of those jobs. And long story short, here I am 3 promotions later because he gave me the self-confidence to actually go ahead and apply for those jobs and compete for those jobs. So that was one of my biggest aha moments.
That is a great aha. Thank you so much. Tony, would you like to give the next response to this question?
I'll do my best. I've had several aha moments in the context of career and life learning, quite frankly. The first I can think of as an aha moment was with family members, and having those family members see in me what I didn't see in myself, and holding me up to basically do certain things that were life-changing moments for others. So caring for people. And the first was my great-grandmother. And I think I was probably around 6 or 7 years old. And she had told me that I was going to be a pastor, a minister. There was no way, no way that I had that in my sights. But I think what I learned from that as I matured was how I care about humanity, about people, and how I put my all into people. And she saw that early in me. And that is part of my natural sort of inclination to be there for others, to help uplift others, and to try to have them see in themselves that what they may not see. And for me, that was a life-changing moment, even though I didn't recognize it at that point. But that's where I can go back to the roots of that and how my family has instilled in that level of confidence and also responsibility that I should have for others. In regard to the career, it was quite frankly in working with students and helping them navigate what they were trying to achieve. I didn't have that as much as I would have liked for my computing sort of journey career. But I did have it in teachers and others that basically saw in me this quality of what they called was leadership. I just call it caring for others. And so the teachers basically in my life helped reinforce that I was smart, that I was gifted in my skill set, and it was in different areas. So the career path that you read off, I mean, everything from film and television to actually supercomputing, HPC environments, to also just doing some things in the software development space and computer graphics. All of these individuals impacted me in a way that really showed me how I can keep progressing in my life, but at the same time help others. And that was the piece for me that was an aha moment, that I could do them both. I could do a wonderful time of helping others and then improving my skill set. And each and every person that I come into contact with, they help me grow as a human being, help me grow from a skill perspective. And I'm so appreciative of having that opportunity. So aha moments have been many for me in my interactions with people. So it's not one specific, there are many.
It's a good perspective. Tanzima, do you have a moment to share with us? An aha moment?
Sure. Well, what Tony and Alfonso has shared, I really can't add to it. So I'll add something complementary, not quite directly related to me and my career, but more like a particular advice that I got from another career mentoring panel, which is, if I cannot manage time for, let's say, a lot of review requests or panel requests or volunteer here, volunteer there, I want to do it, but I don't have time, then instead of just declining, recommend others, junior faculty, postdocs, mentees, and so forth in my place. This is win-win for both organizers and mentees. And I never quite realized before that talk that this is how I benefited from my mentors who recommended me in their places. And I moved in my career that way. So this is something I took from that talk. That was an aha moment, because that was the first time I realized that this is something I should do, because before that, I never thought of doing it. And that's something that, an advice that I act on now. So.
Thank you, Tanzima. Jeffrey, you've got the last response on this question.
Great, yeah. I very much found this question to be interesting, in that everyone in the audience wanted to know some aha moment. But then everybody sort of responded with long-term visions and long-term regular meetings with people. And it wasn't this one thing. It was something that took a long time, and it's a regular thing that has to happen. It doesn't have to be day to day, but I think of mentors who cared, like Tony talked about. And some people care in hard ways and they push you, and some people care in soft ways and they check on you. But people who cared over long periods of time were always the ones who had the biggest impact. I can't think of any sort of just flash in the pan, one-off kind of thing. I can think of people who sort of dismissed me. I think in computing especially, we often have there's documentation, go read it kind of attitude about everything, including mentoring. Like, hey, let's just have a sheet with all of the opportunities that you need to do to be ready for promotion, something or whatever. And like how to get through those hoops, many people are not ready to do, myself included. I was definitely remember being, sort of slow to step out of certain roles and into next roles. And it took a long time to sort of see myself being there. And so I guess more than an aha, I guess everyone sort of called out sort of long, regular meetings with people who cared. And I guess that's always sort of the biggest impact. But I know that's not necessarily the answer. Just like, I remember somebody once, showed me the perfect handshake and I broke in, and that just doesn't happen this way, sadly.
That's a good perspective, that these things take time. Okay, we'll go to our next pre-sent-in question. And I think this one, Tony, you are the lead presenter or lead off on this question. And the question is, how do you help your mentee combat imposter syndrome? And how do you help them see themselves within these computational science and engineering disciplines? Like, how do you help them see them in the discipline? So Tony, you're our lead panelist that volunteered for this question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Suzanne. The first response to that question, I think I'll do is say, I put them in environments where they can see themselves, and really try to focus in on uplifting them in a manner that speaks to what they think they need in regard to reinforcing, whether it be their skills or other attributes that they have. I will speak to that based on, I suffer my own imposter syndrome in this space, even today to a certain extent. Part of that aha moment that you talked about is that I had people that showed me that I belong, especially in the high performance computing arena. I was one of the only Black individuals 30 years ago or what have you that I knew about. In my organization where I started in NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, I was the only one. But they never made me feel like I was the only one. There were so many individuals in that arena that befriended me that I have a relationship today with. And as a result of that, I instilled in others the opportunities to see themselves not as maybe gender orientation or racial orientation or anything of that nature, just put themselves in an environment where they can passionately talk about the things that they love. And that can be something personal in life journey, or it can be professional in that nature. So examples being, one of the things that I was asked to do for supercomputing, the conference, was to create a program. And I did this with a colleague at Boston University. And that program was really centered in what you're talking about, called broader engagement. And what we wanted to do is to bring in people of underrepresented in the field, underserved in the field, and put them in a place where they can see each other and benefit from relationships and grow with each other. So putting them together and having individuals like them, because then they could see that they're not the only one, and their imposter syndrome would diminish somewhat. They still would have a little bit of it, but what was reinforcing them was the other people that they were interacting with that was on the same playing field, or they could help those individuals. So building relationships that help one another help reinforce that they weren't really having imposter syndrome. They had the skill sets, they had the capacity to really showcase their skills in a manner that people accepted. And that's the part that was doing, having people be in poster sessions, giving oral presentations, supporting them, and all of those things helps them remove or diminish the actual imposter syndrome that they were feeling at that particular time. So that's how I've been able to do that, just building those interactions with people so they can sort of see in themselves what others were seeing. And sort of uplifting them to recognize it a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Welcome.
Do any of our panelists have a response to add to this?
I'll just add there and say, I think, yeah, having people present and pointing out that they're experts in something and that they need to present it in an accessible way is one of the best things. Like somebody, I work with high school kids and they do this research project. And of course, high school kids presenting research projects in a scientific competition, you know, they're full of imposters. It's like, what do I know? And after 6 months of doing research, they know more than the judges. They don't quite realize it yet, but they'll come in and sometimes talk too high and sort of act like, dumb it down. You're the expert here. Like, and that, I think, helping them find some wedge of science where they are the expert, or they know more than the people they're talking to, helps them sort of join the community of scientists presenting. And that's a big part of what we do. And by giving them sort of the pedestal, like, oh, you know more than me about this, why don't you talk? And calling on someone who knows more, pulling out a postdoc or a PhD student who's done the work, like, I don't know this, this is the expert here, talk to this person. I think is one of the best things to help them sort of join the group. But we all suffer with this as well, as everyone will say, I'm sure.
Any other comments on this question? Alfonso?
I'll just add one, and that is, as mentors, we are in a unique position to be able to help encourage folks to look at the fact that their uniqueness is a strength. And for me, that imposter syndrome, I think, comes a lot from most of my life. I've always felt like I thought differently than other people. I acted differently than other people. And so I felt that was an oddity. And the closer I got to this position I'm in now, the more I start to realize my quote oddity of my uniqueness actually is my strength, because I don't think the same way everyone else thinks. So as mentors, to reinforce that in our mentees, I think would be helpful.
That's a good point. Tanzima, do you have something to add here?
Yes. I think one great way would be to share our failures. So I am the co-founder of a research and mentoring platform that you mentioned that mentors female computer science and engineering students in Bangladesh. And one of the fun activities that we do as part of the group in targeting just this topic is to share our fun CVs that states all the attempts, things that we have wanted to do and we failed. These like tens of papers that got rejected and hundreds of proposals that got rejected. And that sort of helps a lot to break that barrier where these students see that, oh, this seemingly successful, in quotes, people, they have failed in hundreds of attempts. There are only 2 probably where they were successful, but that was enough to propel their career, where I can see this person as, where I want to be. So I don't have to be good at hundreds of things. I just need to be good at one thing probably, or 2. So that then they just need to, basically that's one of the things that they figure out. If they figure out early in their career, then students tend to be better at managing their imposter system. I don't think imposter system ever goes away. It's something that we manage. And it goes back to what Tony said, building this human connection to help them manage this kind of a feeling. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. That was a very good round of questions. The next question that came in the ranking is perhaps related a little bit to this. And Tanzima, this one's actually yours that you volunteered for. So what do you think are the most important things you can do as a mentor that can help contribute to the success of the mentee?
Well, I think I went for the next one, which is the best way to network. But sure, I can go for it.
Maybe answer the best way to network your mentee then.
Okay. Sure, yeah. So I can take a step. And then most of my mentees are students or postdocs because I'm in academia. So depending on what stage they're in, one great way to build the network of my mentees is to connect them with my existing network. And I do that in a few different ways. For example, if they're starting out, then I include them in existing projects. They probably are given, smaller roles, but they get exposed to my already established colleagues at national labs or industry. And then these people know that there are human resources that are working in the same topics that they are interested in. I also proactively reach out to my collaborators and recommend my students for internships or job opportunities. A lot of the times I hear back, I don't have funding, but I later on, they respond back or follow up when they have funding, because there's always a shortage of well-trained human resources. And one thing that I learned from that particular mentorship panel was that don't wait for your mentees to ask for help. Why don't we proactively mention their names, discuss about, hey, we're looking for this kind of resources or skill set, and I know this is these people who may or may not be working directly with me, but I know their interests are. and then recommend their names based on that, and maybe later on follow up with an email and introduce them. So that's kind of what I have done, and what I have. Well, I don't know. There may be many other things that can be done, but there are a few things that I've done that I think are helpful. But I really have to acknowledge one thing here, which is Tony here has done all of these for many of us. I was one of those 200 students that Tony was talking about. Many a times he has done this personally for me. So thank you, Tony, for not just being a great mentor, but a great role model about how to be a mentor.
Wow. Okay, do we have any panel members that want to add about what the best way to network your mentee and build their success is?
I'll add to it in the sense of the example saying how, and thank you, Tanzima, very much, because that's part of it. And our relationship has evolved where we call each other sister and brother, and that's kind of the care and building that work relationship and that networking that you're talking about. At LLNL, one of the ways that I tried to implement that, and I think there's several individuals on this call that experienced it, was an event. And I sort of enriched the event from an idea from a colleague in our math research department. And he called it Apple Time. And what I did with it was really on Fridays, call together all the students in the program. And it was mostly the computer science students. However, we ended up having people from other disciplines come and be a part of it. And this sort of Apple Time was an experience for them to socialize and get to know one another. And I would have, I went out and bought a ping pong table, foosball table, all kinds of games, things of that nature on my own nickel, and just brought it into the lab. And I wanted them to have a moment where they could network and get to know one another, to understand the work that they were doing, and in a casual sort of environment. Where does some of the best ideas happen? You've heard the story. Sometimes groups go out, they don't do it at work. They may go to a bar or some other place that they're socializing, and then all of a sudden, aha moments that sparked an idea based on conversation and interaction, based on that expertise that each of them brought to bear to actually help uplift what they're trying to do to solve a challenge. And those ideas happen. So with Apple Time, that was that setting, to have individuals be in an environment where they can let their guard down, so to speak, and didn't have to have imposter syndrome or anything of that nature, just be who they were. And as a result of that, that really sparked a lot of camaraderie, friendships, relationships that really help advance students in their progression of learning and learning from each other, because they would call once they knew and they couldn't solve a certain problem, guess what? They just basically found someone that could possibly give them an idea to help them. So, that little example was an opportunity for a lot of our students at the laboratory to really build the relationships and collaborations for their future. And a lot of them are still communicating and collaborating, which is great. That's what I wanted to try to do, was to really have them have that opportunity and stuff. So
Definitely.
Why was it called Apple Time?
Yeah, Jeff. So it was Apple Time based on the fact that I would go to the local farmers market the day before, bring a lot of different fruit, some of the fruit, because they didn't have, the experience of having, I had the luxury of California. So, and having all the produce and things of that nature there. And some of the students really did not have that experience of having even that, and we would just have all this different fruit, and people would just bond over that. And actually, even it was so funny because we would have some of the leadership at the laboratory come and join sometimes, and they just they enjoyed that, and the students got to meet them too. And these are people they looked up to. So, but they got to see them in an environment where they did not have this sort of compelling sort of competition or expectation that they needed to show off or anything of that nature.
The chat is just lighting up with people that are alums of Apple Time talking about how great it is. I just want you to know that if you can't see it. Alfonso, do you have anything to add to this question of what's the best way to network your mentee?
Nothing specific. I could plagiarize a lot of what I've just heard because it makes me think back to the time when I was in Rome, New York, at the Air Force Research Laboratory. And as you may have guessed, in Rome, New York, when you look for diversity, there's not a lot of diversity in Rome, New York. However, every summer, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund brokered internships for students from historically Black colleges and universities. And so every summer, anywhere from 7 to 12 interns, Black interns, or other races. We've had other races there as well who attend the HBCUs. But they come in, and believe it or not, when those students come in during the summer, even though it's only 7 to 12 of them, they increased the Black population by 100% at Rome. And needless to say, those young individuals are somewhat a little bit uncomfortable in that environment because there are not a lot of folks who look like them, and they've even had some situation where they were deliberately reminded of the fact that they were different. And so my wife and I, each summer, what we call adopted the interns. So we would take the interns every weekend to our house for a picnic on Saturday. The ones who attended church, we would take them to church on Sunday because they didn't have transportation. And then the most exciting part of the week was what we call the dinner and Walmart run. All the things that they needed, toiletries or whatever, we take them to Walmart and get those toiletries. So as Tony mentioned, the other thing that I would do was, at some point, I would invite the leadership from the laboratory to the house as well, to sit down and talk with those students, and to have the highest level leadership there with those students, showing their support, really help to build their confidence and just their comfort level of being at Rome. And of course, years after, we got invited to the interns' weddings. We get pictures of their first births. So it really was a great relationship we developed with those interns there at Rome.
Thank you. So I think we'll have you lead off the next question. It sort of fits nicely in with this one. It's about cross-cultural mentoring. And for anybody that has joined the call that doesn't know what cross-cultural mentoring is, that is when you are mentoring somebody that is from a different culture than yourself on many axes. It could be race or nationality or gender, or perhaps in computing, it could be different programming languages, a C person if you're a Fortran programmer, if you want to take the computing channel of it. But the question is, have you ever had experience with cross-cultural mentoring? And were there any particular changes that you were aware of in the style of your mentoring because of that element of cross-cultural mentoring?
Wow. Okay. So there's so many different dynamics in cross-cultural mentoring. And when I look back on my history, one of the things that come to mind, as I said earlier, is the early part of my civil service career when I did not have mentoring, but other people did have mentoring. So it was perceived as if some folks deserved mentoring and some did not. And the mentors would pick and choose who they mentored, and usually someone who looked like them. So it was not a very healthy situation. And I saw that. So of course, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I need to find mentors who look like me, because the mentors who don't look like me, are not interested in being my mentors, which was not necessarily true, but that was my perception at the time. And then once I got into the position I'm in now, or a couple of levels even below, I started getting folks asking me for mentorship, but I noticed very quickly that they were mostly African-American men. And I think for several reasons, I'm sure, one just being the comfort level. And if they felt what I felt, they had not asked for mentors before. So one dynamic was that my mentees at one point all looked pretty much the same. They all looked like me. And so I had to make myself available and be proactive and reach out to folks who don't look like me to say, what are your thoughts on your career? Is there anything that you might need that I can help you with along with your career? So as I reached out and did that more, then I'll just say the diversity of my mentee pool started to change. And so the one challenge was making sure people felt welcome and that they understood that I'm approachable and available to anyone who wants mentoring, regardless of your culture, your race, your gender, or whatever. And I've seen it not just from the race standpoint, but I have many more women now who I mentor. And so, again, that one unique challenge is just being sure that people know that they're welcome to come talk to me. And whenever I do a mentoring talk, I also reach out to mentors and ask. I ask mentors to look at the folks that you're mentoring and see what that mentoring pool looks like, and see if it looks more like your organization or if it looks just like you. If it looks just like you, I would urge you and request that you be proactive. As Tanzima said earlier, be proactive and reach out and look for folks who don't look like you to be sure that there's not, again, a perceived wall of folks who don't look like you.
Which panelist wants to take the next response for that question?
Come on, guys. I don't want to monopolize this. Come on, Jeff and Tanzima. But I would say that I agree wholeheartedly. And I didn't have that as a barrier because I want to see people as human beings first and foremost, not see the cultural pieces. But I learned so much from the cultural pieces. And that's part of me is what's so, I'm excited when I do meet someone that is different than me and I get to learn. And then in return, I'm trying to figure out what I can provide to them as part of their growth in general. So I've done it with gender. I have done it. I mean, I have people from all over the world that I basically have mentored. And part of that experience has really been really, really wonderful to have that experience in a way that has been impactful to them and impactful to me. And that's what mentoring is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a mutual kind of, relationship that happens. What do you learn from it? And to this day, I still do it. I'm basically the board member for a girls organization in Los Angeles. I'm the only male in that group of the board, and the women that I'm interacting with make me feel so included as part of that, and that I can actually contribute to the needs of that particular organization in a way that can really inspire these young people. So I think that there's many of us who have an opportunity to do that. I wish more would do more of that cross-cultural sort of mentoring. And I call upon my lab colleagues all the time. Alfonso was talking about the, HBCUs and MSIs. I have a number of different students like that. And our staff have not really had those type of experiences because their life journey didn't take them that way. But I've asked them to mentor a lot of students that they had to learn about them, and they had their own sort of perceived stereotypes of the students and such, because where they came from, schools, so forth and so on. But once they got to know those students, all of that basically was shut down. Not 100%. I will say that, not 100%, but for the most part, and they got to befriend a lot of those students, which is great.
So there was a follow-on to Alfonso's question from somebody in the chat. So I'll read this one. And the person says that Alfonso brings up a good point in this question in general, that there was a lot of support outside of the lab environment and the workday. And so how many of you are engage your mentees in the beyond 9 to 5 environment? So I think Jeffrey.
All the time. I mean, is it easy? No, it would just take a lot of time, right? I mean, like, I guess the title, being a good mentor, how to be a good mentor, taking time and caring. We don't have a lot of time sometimes, but absolutely. I mean, how are you going to, the biggest sort of difficulty, you asked the question about cross-cultural, what are the things that sort of are the hardest thing that make it happen? I think it's usually making a connection. Mentoring freshman high school African-American students from Chicago, and I'm from South Dakota and 40 and 3 kids, like, it can be hard to find a connection, right? They're just a different world, and you work hard to find something, whether it's sports, cooking, gardening. I mean, just pick stuff. You have to take time outside of just what I would say the not mentoring, but say sort of supervisory role, when you're sort of guiding research as there's a big difference between advisor, I don't know, what do you say, research advisor or supervisor, and a mentor. And I mean, good mentoring happens at the water cool. It happens at apple time. It happens at the pub. It happens at a barbecue. Like, this is where sort of people join in at the group and feel involved and connected. And it's hard to do that just in the work setting only. And so, do I have a lot of mentors who do that? Or the best mentors absolutely did. And the most impactful ones did. So I think that's something we should strive to do. But it's not easy, and hopefully you can find someone who's willing to put that much of an investment in you. That I know people have put that much invested in me. So whoever was in the chat with that question, I mean, that is the crux of it. Finding those people can be hard.
So now I'm going to start to move to take some questions from the chat. And Jeffrey, since you're on the screen, I think this is a good one for you to lead off, and then maybe Tenzima the second response for this. And this is the person that's asking, who's on the phone. Please mute yourself. Thank you. So this is a person that's asking, what are some tips for early career scientists who are just starting their mentorship journey? So they're saying, they're just starting their mentorship journey. What are some tips for mentoring for those early career scientists? Arvind, I hope I have the feel of that question properly.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it's more like we don't have the experience that the panel here has. So, how do you get around? Because you yourself, you possibly are just, a fresh patient from imposter syndrome and whatnot. So how do you actually do it yourself? Yeah,
you sell yourself short. The fact that you have Lionel next to your name, you already should be proud of where you're at. Right? So now I'm gonna have to mentor Arvind.
Thanks.
But you know so much probably about Lionel already, and new summer students are probably arriving right now. I know they need mentors to help them navigate the bureaucracy. I mean, I just took out summer students and just like, where is the cabinet where the pens are, right? Okay, there's a gym on site. Where's it at? Just grabbing a dozen students who just showed up on Monday, like little ducklings, and have no idea where anything is in the work environment. They need people right now. If you want to start being a mentor, ask them out to lunch. I mean, or sit by, they come in, right? There's a dozen things, and you probably already know so much about navigating the bureaucracy. And I know you can start that way. And often, mentoring to the newer people who show up. If you've been there 1 month, you already probably know more than someone else. How are they going to access a certain compute server? What are some, idiosyncrasies of supervisors, or what's the best bus schedule? Where's the best Vietnamese food? I don't know. Whatever people want to talk about, find connections and make them with your people. So maybe you don't even realize the power you have.
Thanks, Tanzima. Do you have something to add there?
Yes. So I'm making some assumptions here. So let's see. I guess the theme is make a connection, just like what Jeffrey said, Alfonso said, and Tony said. And your activities of what you need to do to make that connection will depend on the situation and who you are interacting with. So I'm not going to go with the students because Jeffrey covered it very well. About probably mentoring outside of LANL, what you can do is, do you ask yourself, do you know a colleague who is in the academia? Do you know a colleague who has research group, or do you maybe just reach out? The assumption here is that you just graduated and joined LANL. If that's the case, then maybe you look back at your research lab where you graduated from. Are there students who can take on internships and so forth? If the fact is, if you know that there are such people in your knowledge who could benefit from internships, benefit from just seeing you at Lano, then maybe just reach out and make that connection and say, hey, just are you looking for opportunities? Probably the answer will be no. But that person will know that you have opportunities or you have certain kind of guidance that you can provide that later they can reach out to. That's one way to sort of establishing a proactive mentoring communication. If you already have mentees, then letting them know about opportunities that you look around yourself, something that maybe you can't leverage yourself, but maybe say that, hey, did you know about this? The person would probably say, no, I didn't know about it, or I knew about it and applied and so forth, but I didn't get it. So maybe you have some insights to share, but that's a great way to create communication channel. Later on, let it flow the way it naturally flows, and typically these organic relationships tend to become a lot more fruitful for both end of mentor and mentee relationships. But I would say making connection however you can, that's going to be what's going to create a great mentorship journey.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more questions in the chat. So Hayanam writes, she says, being a mentor can take a lot of energy. How do you replenish yourselves? Do you take a mentorship break from time to time? So who wants to lead off on that one?
I can go. Not really, not at all. Because I've always have 6, 7 students of my own in my research lab. So that's like nonstop there. And then I have my students in Bangladesh. There are hundreds of them. And then they are always constantly asking for, can you look at my SOP? Can you do this? And I have, my deadline is tomorrow morning at 8, and now it's 12 here and at night. So the answer to that is that, yes, it's exhausting, but when I hear back from them as I got that Google scholarship, I got that job, or I got that interview, I got an internship and so forth, that just makes it so much work. And then the next time when I do it, I remember that maybe this is the time I will be able to push someone even farther. And I take their credit myself. I'm not going to tell someone else that, hey, I did it, but to myself, I say that, hey, maybe it's me. So it's that the positive reinforcement of what I did probably made a difference in someone's life. That helps me to sort of replenish. That's kind of where it's the emotional thing.
So Alfonso, do you have any tips on replenishing yourself and staying afloat, to add to what Tanzima said?
So this was not intentional, but most of my mentoring is actually done during the day. I don't have a lot of after-hours mentoring. There are a few individuals that we have actually become very close friends over the years. And so when we mentor outside the day, it actually becomes a friend phone call. We catch up on how family is doing, et cetera. But during the day, all of my mentoring sessions are actually scheduled. And they're far enough apart that I really don't get to the point of being exhausted from the mentoring. So I'm kind of fortunate in that sense.
Jeffrey or Tony, do you have additional tips for replenishing yourself and staying a vibrant mentor?
Hopefully the students or whatever, the people you work with that you're mentoring replenish you a bit. Hopefully you can get something out of that. It's somewhat of a transfer. Like Tenzima says, you're pouring into them, and hopefully you're getting something back out of the helping somebody. And it can be a long investment, like parenting or something. Mentoring can be a long time before you see it gain fruition, but hopefully you can keep heart. And it's also okay to have appropriate boundaries and not answering midnight emails and stuff, and not stay, not letting yourself go so you're still the best mentor you can be. But yeah, I hope you get something out of mentoring. It's amazing, I find, how much I get out of mentoring. It's not only a one-way relationship.
Fantastic. So we do have chat building up, and the question that has come is one that's very apropos for the current climate we are just coming out of in the pandemic, and says, so far, many of the suggestions have involved in-person networking and making a connection. Are there any recommendations for making connections and mentoring in hybrid and remote work environments? So
Yeah, so I can add to that, which is the student research and mentoring platform that's 100% virtual since 2014. 2014, when I was a postdoc, I created that group in Bangladesh. So they have only seen me probably 5 times in person over the past 8 years. So it's 100% virtual, and it's all based on, and now more than ever, we have learned about all these technologies of creating events, doing doodle polls and the fun activities online, right? So it has become, I would say, easier now to make those connections. And when I say connection, it's typically based on those activities that we do, which is you talk to that person over Zoom and maybe just spend 15 minutes and you have your coffee, that person can have their coffee, and you talk about your failures. That, let's just say, that's one of the activities you do. That makes a connection because the person sees you as a person who is beaten up, and then, but also they look up to you, right? So all the things that I sort of hear we discuss could possibly be implemented in a virtual world as well, by using the technologies that we have gotten really good at using.
Tony, Jeff, or Alfonso, would you like to add?
I think when we started What Makes a Great Mentor, what were the aha things? It was showing you care, regularly having contact, and maybe that's different or harder to make sure you're focusing on just one thing in a virtual environment, and making sure the person you're mentoring is also just focusing on one thing in the virtual environment and not looking at other things, which can be a hard thing for sure. But making sure that you're making a connection, seeing how things are going, checking in regularly. I mean, virtual things can be a total improvement and additive multiplier in improving the connections you make. But I still think that it's, I don't know, maybe an email doesn't mean as much. To me, it doesn't. And so maybe that's why we talk about all the in-person things more. But a Slack message or a video call, the more you can do to make an impact, to show you care, I think is the best you can do. And hopefully you're able to connect with those people who you're seeking to be your mentors as well, by reaching out to them in a way you can hopefully connect.
Yeah, I find Slack very helpful for these distributed communities, because that's something that you can wait and answer, but I'm not a panelist. So I was just thinking, you got me thinking about the tools that we use for remote communication. Are there any other responses for tools or tips that for doing virtual mentoring, or should I move on to our next question?
Yeah, I'd like to share possibly a couple examples we do at Lawrence Livermore on this front. And I had one yesterday with one of our senior scientists who asked me for advice, and it's just a little coffee break that we basically do in the mornings to basically go and talk. We instituted a program that really talked about come say hi, and just have individuals just come and say hi. And that goes back to, how do you get involved a little bit? That's how. Just have a program where people can come in and just come say hi and meet one another. And then that may form this sort of bond and relationship. The other things that we have is a program for our employee resource groups as well. And it started by our Asian Pacific Islander group, really centered around meet and greets and having people do that. And I'm planning to do that with some colleagues across the lab complex for our GEM, if people know what GEM is, the Engineering Fellowship Program. Basically, we're going to do that with all of the fellows across all of the laboratories, and have them come in just to meet one another and meet and greet and talk about the labs, talk about the research, talk about the things they're doing. So they get to meet one another. And basically, guess what? They're going to probably find collaborators or people that they build relationships with out of that, which is wonderful, because we want them to do that kind of thing. So and don't shortchange having fun. And Tanzima alluded to it and things. There's Kahoot, there's Family Feud, there's all kinds of things you can do to help build sort of this natural connection that we miss in person, but will be fun over a actual streaming environment as well. Can you imagine if all of us just did a little polling competition right now about just the historical nature of high performance computing and things of that nature? How many people would be involved in that right now and having fun with it? Just giving people opportunities to smile and have a chance to connect with one another is a really, really good way to do it in a hybrid environment. But just come say hi, have coffee, whatever it is, and or have lunch or whatever it is to meet one another. That's how you can do some of the mentoring things. Don't make it necessarily totally formal if you don't have to. You can make it very formal though and technical if you want to do that.
That's right. Our respondents are saying that structured interaction can also be a lot less intimidating.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so we can take another question in the chat, but while we do that, I want to start, Tony, since you're on. How long do you think it takes to mentor a person well?
It depends on the level of the individuals and what you're doing. Because there can be individuals that you start out from an undergrad perspective and you're mentoring all the way for the rest of their life, possibly. But, with that said, navigating graduate school, or if they're in graduate school, undergrad, moving from sophomore to junior to senior, so forth and so on, right? And you're moving, well, Jeffrey's doing high schoolers, just like I have. You're basically, it can be as long as you want it to be. You're the one who have to commit to this and say and raise your hand that you want to do this. And you have to say whether or not you want to do it beyond 9 to 5 or what have you. It is your choice to have that sort of structured mentorship, or you can have it open-ended. But it can go from a year, actually it can go for 3 months, summer internship, to lifelong. It just depends on your choice and what you want to try and do.
Okay. Tanzima, is that any different is that time length any different for people that are striving through the academic chain, or is that answer work just as well for people navigating that?
Right. The essence is, Tony captured it, which is in academia, my grad students, they stay with me for 6 years, about on average. PhD students, the undergrad students, if they start, depending on when they start, some continue to their grad program, some don't, and they get a job. Mostly, those are probably the students who don't need beyond their academic journey. But the grad students, I've seen that they maybe because they spend so much time with you, or the fact that they have chosen a career path where my recommendation or whatnot, they look up and keep coming back for advices. What should I do? Where should I go? Who should I talk to? So those relationships I have seen that are far longer running, and then at some point they become our colleagues, right? And then they have students we exchange, and then if they go onto the national labs, then basically those are the ones who recruit my future generation students as their mentees and so forth. So those relationships that start from the students being in grad programs, I've seen those to run much longer, and they can actually go all the way up to, who knows, end of my career.
Alfonso, you're coming from the Air Force and also, well, the civilian industry around the Air Force. Is there a different perspective for that in industry, or is that about the same?
So I actually am not industry from the standpoint of a contractor. I actually am civil service. I am the feds.
Okay, sorry.
if you will. But we have a phrase that we use often, and that phrase is mentor for life. We don't really look at some type of endpoint for it. And I think what we're mostly saying is if there is some objective we're trying to meet with the mentoring, then that can kind of define a timeline, and you can kind of define whether or not you've been successful in meeting that objective and whether or not you need more time to meet the objective. But if there's no objective involved, my folks tend to stay with me until either they move away and achieve the thing that they're trying to achieve. Some just kind of fall off, so to speak. I might hear from them 3 or 4 years later. But then there are others that no matter where they go, I've followed one couple. Matter of fact, when I was at Rome again, I pulled that couple up to Rome and introduced them to some division chiefs who fought over hiring them. It was a husband-wife couple, and the winning divisions got that husband and wife couple, and they've moved twice, 3 times since that job. They now have a beautiful baby girl who's about the same age as my one and only granddaughter. And now, so even now, still, after all those moves and all those life changes, occasionally he still calls up and says, I think it's about time for us to have a chat. And so we get on the phone, we talk about family first, and then we start talking about what it is he wants to do next with his career.
So we have this question that came in on the Google Sheet, and this is about helping your mentee navigate a difficult situation. So it's a little bit different tack than what we've been on. So the question is, how do you help mentees navigate fraught group or supervisor situations if they encounter one? So Jeffrey, I would like you to lead off this question.
Thanks. I wasn't prepped for that question. What do you do with people when there's, to encourage them to be honest, above board, and try to be professional, keep their expectations. Sometimes people come in hot, try to cool them down, and make sure that they sort of handle themselves in a professional manner. I've had situations where that hasn't been the case. You want people to be able to advocate for themselves, and sometimes if they're coming from a difficult spot. I don't know if I've gone to both parties before and sort of tried to help them see that they're on the same team. Maybe they seem too antagonistic before, but anytime there's disagreement, I wish there was a work therapist for some interactions I've seen where I feel that, say, a supervisor and a mentor on their side, I say on research, the research advisor doesn't feel that the research mentor or the supervisee is doing enough. And I'm also, say, mentoring the student to help them move forward in their career. That can be a really tough situation to be in, I guess. And trying to talk to both parties and help them see, like, you're on the same team. You want everyone wants to succeed here. What do we need to do to make sure that happens? And I mean, people come from different cultural backgrounds or just different backgrounds, period, and expectations can be very different. And so I guess I talked around a lot of, it takes a lot of time, and sort of being a patient listener and encouraging both, encouraging your mentee to be calm, professional, speak up for themselves, and hopefully you can find a way to navigate a difficult situation.
I think it's, giving them strategies for how to navigate is very important. Do any of our panelists want to add to the advice on what we do if we have a mentee that's in a difficult situation?
I will add, and it's interesting, Tanzima, you and I had some of these conversations in the past, but listen is very important as part of the conversation, and then encouraging conversation to happen. And that conversation is possibly with both parties, but it's also you listening to everyone that's involved. Because what happens a lot of times with us as human beings, we perceive certain things that possibly aren't really there. And we've basically adopted those to be real. And first is to try to just help with that conversation and introduce it in a manner that isn't threatening to either party. And try to have a conversation that actually centers and grounded in what is how people are feeling because one of the other things you can't do is tell someone how they should feel. So you have to listen to how they are experiencing it and then try to absorb that and learn from it in a manner that can help teach you as well. Because as a result of that happening, you need to help each of the people, the individuals involved, understand as best they can each other and where they're coming from, so they can set, as Jeffrey alluded to, those expectations and things of that nature, so they can get to the same path. Now, if there's more difficult, I think there was a question around that, and conflict of interest and hardship and all of that. If there's more of a difficult experience, I usually try to see if I can take that mentor-mentee relationship and separate it and find another mentor for that particular individual where it isn't really working or not going to work. But I've been very, very lucky that I've had so many individuals at our lab that basically signed up for that challenge where it wasn't connecting, and they figured out how to actually navigate that. And some of that was based on the cultural sort of differences that they had and not understanding that. And then it's also the expectations that they had as well, because they had all of these sort of, stereotypes and expectations that they had for the individual coming from a certain school or things of that nature, and they weren't there. And then they felt disappointed. And then that was built the friction, and now what you got to do is try to figure out how to have that conversation. And so what you want to do is facilitate those conversations so they can basically happen in a manner where both parties understand better so they can move forward.
Thank you. Any last thoughts? We're almost at the limit of our time. So any last thoughts from our mentoring panel on this question or any of the others that we've addressed?
I'll add Haya's question about how do I replenish myself. I go to the beach in the ocean. And then I also take a lot of mentees and students with me to a lot of places, because the other thing besides Apple time that we do in our laboratory, I take students for a hiatus in Tahoe. We would go rafting on Saturday, hiking in the mountains, and then basically horseback riding, beach, it was cold. The ocean is cold in the Pacific, but we would just go and just do, I had like 70 students, actually over 100, 130 with me going over to the Tahoe experience. So seeing those students smile and their experiences that they never had, seeing Yosemite and everything else, boy, that replenished me quite a bit, and seeing them smile and have those experiences. But it's wonderful to be a mentor. I encourage each and every person listening and watching this to actually engage in the human experience of mentoring another human. It's a joy to do. So I hope you do it.
I build on that and say, I find computing itself to be somewhat isolating at times. Like it's me with the computer, typing, debugging, whatever, reading papers. These are sort of isolated things. Okay, there's research meetings where you talk about stuff, but without other people interacting in a personal way, I wouldn't have the motivation or the drive to keep going. I think we all sort of have some part of us that wants to connect to others. Mentoring is a great way to do that, because at least in my bubble, math and computer science can be an isolating task. Again, they're collaborative parts, but a lot of the time it's individual people working and pushing on computing code or writing papers, and mentoring can be a great way to also sort of build up your research motivation and tank. It's not just say you're feeling good about yourself.
Sure. Okay, I want to thank each of our panelists. So thank you so much, Alfonso, for joining us, and Jeffrey, and Tanzima, and Tony. We really appreciated your wisdom. This will be recorded and it will be posted on the event page for this, and later when the HPC-W Action Group's website is up. These webinars will be preserved on an archive there as well. So thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you to the audience for joining us and being excellent listeners and contributing your questions both live and in the Google Sheet. And we will see you all in the next webinar on June 15th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you
Thank
for
you, Suzanne.
organizing.
And thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks to the rest of the panel. Yes, great meeting you guys.
Definitely a joy. Have a great day.
You too. Oh, and Kidda, thank you for moderating the microphones in the chat. We couldn't have had the peaceful environment without Kidda's moderation.